Blog Talk Radio.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Hypergalactic Enigmas. I'm your host, Dr. Franklin Rule, and I'm joined by co-host Benny Gooseland. Are you there, Benny?
Yes, I'm here, Doctor. How are you this evening?
Fine, and I thought tonight we would discuss Bigfoot and his cousins. So, as you guys know out there, we, of course, have Bigfoot in the Pacific Northwest, otherwise known as Sasquatch. Down in Florida, he's called the skunk ape. In the Himalayas, he's known as the Yeti, and then there are cousins called the Almasti in Russia, the Yowie down under in Australia, the Ufidi, who's in Nyasaland in Africa, the Tano giant in the Gold Coast of Africa, El Sismeti down in Guatemala, and the Woodhouse man in England, the Ye Ren in China, and the Great Hairy Mohas in New Zealand, just to name a few. So with all of these reports of these entities coming from so many areas of the globe, it seems to me that this is a real-life creature. I should point out that we did not discover the gorilla till about the 1800s, and the mountain gorilla, who's rare, wasn't discovered till the beginning of the 20th century. So I submit to you that there are other creatures that have yet to be identified, including Bigfoot and his cousins. Do you not agree, Benny?
I agree completely, Doctor. You could even go think that that there's even different types of these species, but are all in the same family. Like you were saying, you named off this huge list. They're all in the same family,
yeah.
And then.
But for example, the Yowie down in Australia is described as being squatter and shorter than your typical gigantic Bigfoot, who may be 6, 7, or 8 feet tall. And then, of course, we have the skunk ape, who says an extremely offensive smell according to eyewitnesses, and some have 3 toes, others are reported to have 5 toes. So certainly there would be differences, just as with other species of animals. They're all different to a certain degree. That's why they're called species. They have different characteristics, even though they belong to the same general family.
Yeah, I guess kind of like monkeys, where you have different types of monkeys. And even with these Bigfoot creatures, you have some smarter than others. Some will probably be closer to human intelligence. When some would probably have more of the intelligence of a gorilla.
Well, that's a very good point. Certainly.
Yeah, I've seen some footage. Pardon me, Doctor?
Just as we have differences, again, for example, as you point out, intelligence. The orangutan is supposed to be the most intelligent of the monkeys, followed by the chimpanzees, then lesser related creatures. Even though they're very cute, the lemurs are much less intelligent than their cousins, the chimps and orangutans. So that's a good point, that the different Bigfoot creatures have different levels of intelligence.
Yeah, some people, there's a lot of confusion with the Bigfoot creature. A lot of people think that it's just one type of creature, the tall, brown, Harry and Henderson's looking creature. It's almost become a stereotype, and there's a lot of confusion. But when really, with just the Bigfoot creature alone, there's a lot of scientific detail that goes into understanding the creature. That it's not just some fantasy creature. But there's good reason that we don't all the time see them off, and about.
Well,
kind of like there's bears, but we don't see bears every day.
Right, and again, we have, as you point out, bears come in black, brown, white, and mixed shades. There's the sun bear with the yellow on it. We've had reports primarily of either dark black or brownish fur for Bigfoot, but there are a few cases, such as an Ohio Bigfoot, if we can believe it, who did have white fur.
Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, actually. With the abominable snowman, Has there been any reports of the abominable snowman actually having white fur?
That's a very good point. I think we've had a few cases of that, although most of them are described as dark brown or blackish in coloration. And I wanted to point out, since you're in Kentucky, back in 1964, there's a creature that was dubbed just it, seen for a couple of weeks up in, I think it was Grant County, 7 feet tall with dark hair, and was off the coast, off the U.S. Highway 36. I was wondering if you're familiar with that case or any other entities like that in your area.
I've not heard of that case, but there was, just as a child, there was several reportings of a creature very similar to that. They didn't call it Bigfoot. That's what was strange, but my uncle actually said that when he was on top of the mountain here, just not even a mile up the road, that this creature actually grabbed a hold of his van and picked up on his van. And he said eventually the creature just let his van go. And he's not the only one that's reported this. You know, there's been several people to actually say that they have seen this creature even crossing the road going up into the mountains. Now, I live in what I say is the darkest corner of the earth. I live up in the head of a hollow, and so I'm right in the mountains. So you'll see a lot of strange creatures. I've seen, bizarre turtles and just creatures that I can't even explain. And but yeah, used to you would hear these sightings of Bigfoot or of these creatures all the time when I was younger. But around in the 90s, they actually put in like a new road, because where we live in the mountains, in the 90s, they sort of made it a little more modern for us and easier to travel across the mountain. But ever since that new road come in, there's not been any more reportings of this creature.
Maybe scared off by the additional traffic. But how did your uncle and others describe the creature in terms of coloration and height?
I don't ever remember him mentioning the color, but I know he said it was a fairly large creature. If I'm not mistaken, he may even use the word gorilla. Nobody said the word Bigfoot. Why, I'm not really sure. But
what did he do? Did he actually lift the truck, or how? What did he do to the truck?
He said this creature grabbed the back end of his van and just lifted up on it. And
lifted up from the back?
Go. Yeah,
was he trying to destroy it, or was it an act of curiosity or anger, or do you know what?
He said it wasn't aggressive. He said it just was picking up on the back of the vehicle. He said it wasn't being aggressive, and it held it there for a while, he said. He never did say exactly how long, but he said the creature eventually just put his van down and he drove off. And he talked about it for a long time. I actually heard him talking about it with my family here just the other day, talking about that creature.
Well, maybe we should have him as a guest sometime to talk about it.
That would be nice. I could actually talk to him and see.
Right. Now, regarding hostile Bigfoot, this could have just been an act of curiosity as opposed to anger, but back in 1893, Teddy Roosevelt, the well-known outdoorsman and president, wrote a book, The Wilderness Hunter, in which he described a case that he believed was true. Two hunters were up in Washington and were attacked by a Bigfoot creature. And ultimately, one of them was killed by it, according to his partner. And then he relayed the story to Roosevelt, who apparently believed it. So that's an early case, and an unusual case. Normally think of the Bigfoot critters as being rather shy, avoiding man, etc. But if we're to believe this case, this particular entity did kill a human being. And we've had other reports. For example, in 1948, a Norwegian miner who was working in Sikkim, which is adjacent to Tibet, claimed that he was attacked but escaped from a Yeti. And then in 1957, some explorers were told by Nepalese natives that at least 5 of their kinsmen were killed by a Bigfoot or Yeti. So we have a few cases like that. And then perhaps the most intriguing comes from Canada, and that's in the Northwest Territories, specifically the district of Mackenzie, where there's an entity in the Nahanni Valley that's said to have killed several miners. And the locals warn the miners not to go into this one valley. They call it the Valley of the Headless Corpses, because some of the bodies found apparently were decapitated by a Bigfoot creature. So while we normally think of them as being perhaps gentle, shy, and retiring, there could be some counterexamples. But of course that happens in everything. You have some animals that are friendly, others aren't. Dogs, we have the pit bulls who can attack, and we have your collies who are gentle, and other dogs. But again, you can have counterexamples in every type of species, I believe.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. That you're speaking of the violent Bigfoot, the movie The Abominable Snowman, the one we covered on the Dr. Rule show.
Right.
At the end of that, I never really did understand it. Did the Bigfoot kill him?
No, the Bigfoot did not kill him. No.
Oh, okay. In that movie, well, it confused me because it began to it faded after he seen the Bigfoot. Those two come out. It went to I think, like I showed, it faded to a like a snowy scenery.
Yes, but
I wasn't for sure
our hero Peter Cushing was found leaning against a snowy mountain. He was found by his wife and the porters. And when he spoke again about this, he said, "There is no Yeti. It's a myth." So somehow he had been brainwashed by these creatures. They did not kill him or anyone else. Every human who died in that, such as Forrest Tucker, died because of their own, being careless, or Forrest Tucker went out shooting because his partner had been killed. But the Yetis were depicted as being highly intelligent and nonviolent. My objection again on that film, as I mentioned before, my favorite Yeti film, but at the end we only saw part of their faces. And this is Hammer Films. Reputation, their experience in horror films, excellent with makeup. They should have shown us the entire creature, not just his face and shadow. That's my only objection to that film.
I agree. I love the film, and that's I agree with you completely. Like with sci-fi movies, as you and I have talked about before, I like to see the whole creature, throughout the whole film.
Right. As I said, my one objection to The War of the Worlds, a classic from 1953, with Gene Barry, we only saw the entity that had these three globes for eyes in his face for about, I don't even know if we saw it 60 seconds. We saw some hand at the end outstretched as they were dying, but we only saw the complete entity for less than a minute. As I said on the Pat Sajak show when I was covering this film on his talk show, we sci-fi buffs want to see the E.T. for more than a few seconds and more than one scene, but throughout the film. So a few of my favorites say we didn't see the E.T. enough, or the Abominable Snowman. But certainly that's a possibility that at least some of these creatures can be violent. And I'm impressed that Teddy Roosevelt, who put his reputation on the line, endorsed the idea that this creature existed, although the term Bigfoot wasn't used at that time. But certainly a possibility. Now, I was on a Bigfoot expedition in 2005. I think I mentioned this too, but not on the show, for the program A Current Affair. And what happened was we had some video footage of apparently a Bigfoot coming out of hibernation from northern Manitoba, from an area known as Norway House, which is an Indian reservation. And it looked very authentic to me. Of course, you can't be certain of anything 100%. But the footage looked pretty genuine. Then the next day, the producer of the show called me and said, "Do I want to go up to northern Manitoba and hunt for Bigfoot?" And I was just about to eat breakfast, and I said, I'm a wimp. I'm not an outdoorsman to go hunt for Bigfoot. He said, "We'll pay you well, and you get some good publicity." So I said, "Let me think about it." Over breakfast, I said, "Go ahead and take it. Come on, don't be afraid." So it was later that day that they sent a limo for us for a 4:30 a.m. Plane flight. But interestingly, one thing happened I want to point out as a lesson. One of the producers for the show was going to accompany me, along with a gal named Cherie Curry, who had been an actress and singer, and now she is a chainsaw artist. She actually does a great deal of artwork using chainsaws with wood. And she had her chainsaw